done so far with one of the biggest names in the whiskey world. I've got the new sherry collection from Tomatin, and we've got Scott Adamson to talk us through this brand new collection they've brought out, which is a kind of the third in the series. Is that correct? From the Italian, French, or French Italian, and then the sherry.
We had the Portuguese in there as well. This is a little bit different. We'll get into that, but yeah, good to see you, Kevin. Good to see everyone as well. So, how are things with you? You've been good?
All good here. Gutted I missed the Fringe. It looked unbelievable. I seen the halftime orange was the 32-year-old, I think, by Tomatin, or the 34 from Tomatin.
It was the 36 we had. Yeah.
Oh, the 36. Yeah. So I think I was quite gutted to miss that, but I'm really glad I've got these. I said when I spoke to you the other day, and I was like, I'm going to open all three. Then we decided we can get on Monday night. So it's been very difficult. Now, as you can see these here, I've tried to open them and I've stopped myself. So, but the Manzanilla has been opened. So in this series just now, we've got the Manzanilla, a Palo Cortado, and a Pedro Ximinez for the three, all different ages, slight range and finishing as well, and the kind of times for a couple of years all the way up to 8 or 9 years, I think, on one of them. But just a little bit about Scott. Everyone, if you've never met Scott works for Tomatin. He is the kind of face of Tomatin. I think during lockdown, you would have seen him when Roy had him on the channel, and they kind of changed the game for being online whiskey tastings and so forth from festivals. It was fantastic, and I think that was a kind of pioneer thing. I said that to you before. I think Tomatin kind of grew that to new heights for these kind of online festivals. So it's amazing from that. Like, a little bit about yourself and where you started. You've been with Tomatin for quite some time now, but your story wasn't a case of going into working the whiskey straight away, was it?
No, it certainly wasn't. But just on the online thing, it's quite funny, because that was for me for 2 or 3 years there. Every day, almost, Zoom tastings, whether it was to the public or whether it was behind the scenes for like trainings and things. It was such an important part of life for at least 2 years, and I think everyone kind of thought, oh, there's going to be a hybrid thing coming back out of lockdown. But the moment that someone went and done a tasting in person, we were all back on the road. And oddly enough, Thursday night there was the first time I've done an online live thing in at least a year. And I only really recognised that when I sat down in this room, which was for a period of time more of a studio than a functioning room of the house. And I sat down and realised I was sitting on a kid's piece of Lego. It was it's very quickly changed. But yeah, no, I mean, that was such a strange time, and things like we did the first virtual whiskey festival with Tomatin, and it was great to get a load of pals together and do that as well. And I think what we'd planned being maybe 2 or 3 hours ended up being 5 or 6 hours long, but we got to work on the Monday morning and realised that 20,000 people had tuned into this thing, and it had just grown into something that we did not expect it to be. It won some mad award, like some marketing award, and it beat KFC, and it was on a shooting budget and put together in 2 days. So it was a wild time. But yeah, no. So I, now at Tomatin, I'm blender and global brand ambassador. But my first love was history. Throughout school, I loved my history. I grew up and still live about half an hour north of Inverness, so an incredible amount of history in this area. So I studied Scottish history at university, and oddly enough, that became my route into the whiskey industry. So the distillery, this is going back to 2012 now, was kind of, I mean, Tomatin's a relatively big brand now in the single malt space, but back in 2012, it was fledgling, if you will. We'd been releasing single malt bottles for over 100 years, but this was when we really decided we're going to push this to become the core of the business. And so my job for 8 weeks in the summer was to go into the distillery and research the history as an 8-week internship. And then, 12 years later, I'm sitting with yourself having some drams on a Monday night, getting carried away.
It's amazing, when I was up for the 4 days there in March, and some of the stuff that you were able to find to kind of, there's history within whiskey, but you were able to find some, even like the books and things to go all the way back for years and years. It's been signed by some of the kind of the stories that you hear about, and from 1890 or 1901 and things. It's bizarre to see that it's just a cool story. You're and everyone's like, I've got this passion for whiskey. I'd love to work there, and you've went a roundabout way of your passion's kind of got you there, and now you've got the best of both worlds, right? You're still able to find walking about the distillery. I bet you still find some things like I've not seen that before, and then kind of just show themselves to you, like what is going on here.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was interesting. The kind of almost as I was coming towards the end, the history side of what I was interested in is when the whiskey side came in. So when I started that internship, I think it was either the week before or the week of that I went to my first whiskey tasting, and the two were totally separate from one another, you know. So over that 8 weeks of learning about the history of the distillery is when I started to really get into my whiskies myself. So the two grew together. And yeah, you're right. It's I would say that most of the historical stuff that I have found has not been in the time where my role has been to research the distillery's history. You know, that was 8 weeks, and we found out quite a lot. But there was no bundle of documents for me to go through. Then I had to start looking for them, and then just over the last 12 years, popping into different buildings or speaking to different people or opening the lid on a box that I probably shouldn't have. You find a document and you're like, that's an amazing thing. So I think one of the ones I showed you was the original prospectus from the company. So this was almost like the crowdfunding document. You know, this was their Just Giving page in 1897, and it was the three founders of the distillery explaining what the distillery was going to be, how many shares would be available and at what price. And you know, that's a nice little thing. That's a piece of the history of the distillery before the bricks and mortar. So yeah, these things pop in and out every so often, and it's almost trying to fit them into the jigsaw puzzle and then being willing to find something that totally changes the idea that you already had. I think that's the cool thing about history is it's only what you've found. You know, it's not you can't claim to know everything just because it's already happened. You can find a document that totally changes the way you think of the business that we work in.
It's amazing. I think it's amazing, and obviously now doing the kind of blending side of things, and you've got such a massive say in how the whiskies are going to kind of come out and what the finished product will be, and just to have both to kind of be that involved in the history and also the making. Like you'll end up in 100 years' time with your name kicking about in a book that someone will pop in and find what were we doing in 2020, you know, and Scott Adamson will be somewhere in a book or mentioned in the back of a wall somewhere that nobody's going to see for a long time. But I think I think it's an amazing thing to be able to have that opportunity to just kind of look about and find so much cool stuff. And as the amount of stuff you showed us when we were there was like, whoa, and I'm not a history guy at all. I struggle to just spell the word history, never know anything. But to sit and see all that and just was like, this is so cool. And you know, the national drink, to go that far and delve into even more to a passion and a distillery that you also love and is a massive part of your life, to bring it to everyone. You know, you don't have to hide it. It's more like everyone, this is what we've been able to find, and from 1897 till today, you know, I think it's cool for me personally.
Yeah, I think what I love about the history is it ties it back to what started it all. But I think, you know, we talked about this when you were at the distillery. Tomatin's not a place where you can go and say, we've been making whiskey the same way for the last 127 years. That's absolutely not true. And I would say it's not true of any distillery that's 100 years old. You know, the only thing that is the same is the same water source. But the barley varieties are different. The yeast strains are different. The technology is different. So what I really love about the history, yeah, you get to see how the distillery run its business and things like that. But it's the people side of it, you know, and a name will pop up and you're like, I work with that person's great grandson. You know, Tomatin's a really cool place where there is that human connection. There's the 30 cottages on site, all lived in by people that work at the distillery. And, you know, my favorite bit of, I guess, the history of the distillery is that graffiti on the wall in Warehouse 6, where you've got Evan's dad writing his name when he's a 15-year-old boy, you know, and now Evan's been with the company for over 40 years. So that there's a real, there's a human connection through whether it's a book, a piece of graffiti, an old photo. And that's the part of the story that I think we try and stick true to with the whiskey today. We're absolutely not making whiskey the same way as we did 100 years ago, but you know, the families, they're still the same families that are making it.
It's pretty cool to me. And then obviously we've got some new products now. The core range, the legacy, I think, has got a really cool story, and that is Tomatin through and through. There's, I think, just how that's made and how much involvement staff, and it's not just, you know, oh, let's put this out to our own market. The story in behind it's a bit deeper with, you know, the blind tasting from members of the staff to try and pick these casks. And I think for just your typical dram for value for money and things, I'm not just saying that. I do think it's a great product that they have, that you have here as well, and it's to then bring out these special releases on top of it. I'm going to say, for me personally, I think pricing is very good on it as well. It's obtainable. We're still to get to the quality assurance check that I need to do as well. But I think, as I say, Palo Cortado is one of these things that I've had a couple of and I've loved. And I think when we were at the distillery, I did say that to us. I'd love to smell a Palo Cortado cask, and that was just prior to us knowing about this release that was coming up. You know, the don't tell anyone. I was like, don't worry, I'll not tell anyone. But we'll say hi to a couple of people that have popped in just now. So we've got Drew all the way from Arizona. He's able to catch the start of it early on. He says he was going to kind of struggle to get in. So good to see you, buddy. Danny's in as well. Dan Kieran from down in Wales. Tater Dom is in. Peterhead Frank, how you doing? Gav's Drams from Edinburgh. Highland Hamish. So Hamish is a good guy. He's works at Castle Stewart Golf Club as well, and he does kind of tastings, and he works in the whisky shop.
I know Hamish.
Hamish is a good guy. Who else have we got in? Jimmy Jazz is all the way in as well. Good to see you, mate. Whisky Liberation Front, good stuff as well. He's watching from the front whilst walking the dogs. Good stuff. We'll keep it PG as well. We'll not start whistling, all right. Who else I've seen? Thomas Jones in. Hello, everyone. And someone was just talking about what's not to love. It's just jumped. The chat's just jumped on me here. So if I've missed anyone, I do apologise. But if you've got any questions as well, just pop them in and we'll get to them for sure. There's my wee ma. She's popped in as well. The whiskey friend, he's in. Good to see you, mate. So yeah, as there any questions, go for it. I think I'm going to pour. What do you think? Would you go the order of go with the Manzanilla, then move on, or would you have a specific way to drink these?
I would do that, and it's not even so much that follows the age layer. It's more for me, it's the style of sherry. You know, you start with Manzanilla. I've actually got a glass of Manzanilla right now. Shout out to the Port Leaf Distillery. I picked this up at the Fringe at the weekend. It's a cracking bottle of Manzanilla sherry. That's a really bone dry style of sherry. It's a really dry wine. You then move on, and there's other styles of sherry that we've not covered in this collection. We've done in previous bottlings, but you move on then to Palo Cortado, which has kind of got elements of biologically aged wines and oxidatively, and then you move into the Pedro Ximinez at the end, which is, you know, we've gone from a really bone dry wine to the sweetest natural wine in the world. So for me, it's not even so much about going youngest to oldest here, it's about the profile of the whiskey itself.
I think I'd said when we were there that I'm under the impression, it's a kind of personal look at it, that if we never had sherry casks, I don't think Scotch whisky would be as what it is. It wouldn't be this, you know, £4.5 billion export per year that we've got. You know, sherry's got such a huge play in the Scotch whisky industry, and when you look at it now, and you know, I don't know much about sherry at all. It's something I know I like it in my whiskies to a certain degree, but I don't know much about the kind of processes. And obviously, when we were at the distillery, able to speak to yourself about it, you're able to go over to Ximénez and the Triangle and what not kind of handpick, but you're able to go there and see the processes, and it's a trust thing as well, right? And I think Manzanilla, as I told, I know what PX is, and Oloroso, you can kind of pick that up. But when I had Manzanilla, I was having to look it up. So my understanding of it is it's slightly drier, a wee bit funkier. But what made you decide this? Because if we go through, this is a 10-year-old, 46% non-chill filtered natural colour.
Yeah, so I think that's the first point where this maybe is a departure from the countries collections that we've done previously. So the French, Italian, and Portuguese collections, across each set, you had 3 whiskies that were the same age with the exact same length of finish. You know, they were distilled on the same date, finished for the same length of time. So it was a really clear, this is what these different casks will do to the same spirit. But what we've done with the sherry collection What you maybe gain on the analytical side of those three, you lose in not being able to pick the whiskey at maybe its absolute optimum time. So what we've done here is we've got a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 17-year-old, and they're all just screaming of just absolute quality and flavour. But yeah, the Manzanilla, this is something that we did a few years back. We had a previous release called Quattro, and it was 4 sherry matured whiskies. We had a Fino, a Manzanilla, a Oloroso, and a PX. And the reason that we released that was back at that time, I was going to a lot of whiskey festivals, and people are coming up to you and going, "I love sherry matured whiskey." And I think whether rightly or wrongly, when we say that, we typically think of Oloroso, and that's because it's the predominantly used sherry cask in the industry. And so we thought, I wonder, as a company, I wonder what would happen if we tried different styles of sherry cask and almost challenge what people understand sherry matured whiskey to be. And I remember the Manzanilla really standing out as this is not what you would expect when you say sherry maturation. And it goes back to the wine itself. If you close your eyes and think of a sherry, you're probably thinking of something similar in color to a whiskey. You're thinking of a dark liquid, that kind of, sweet sherry bobby, the Harvey's Bristol cream type. This right here, this is sherry. This is Manzanilla sherry. It's a crisp white wine. It's bone dry. It's really funky. It's almost like it's got the dryness of like a prosecco or something like that. Really citrusy, but it's got this cool kind of doughy, almost like sourdough bread element. Now, Fino and Manzanilla as sherry styles are almost identical in the way that they're made. It's the same grape type, the Palomino Fino. They develop this layer of yeast in the cask called flor that stops any oxygen getting in. The real difference is that Manzanilla is made exclusively in Sanlúcar de Barrameda. So we've got the sherry triangle. So all sherry can only be made in this tiny little region in the south of Spain. And you've got Jerez, you've got Porto de Santa Maria, and you've got Sanlúcar de Barrameda. And Sanlúcar de Barrameda is where Manzanilla is made. And it's got this unique little microclimate that almost brings in this salinity and saltiness to the wine that is almost unreplicable. It's almost like if you think of what an old Pulteney is in whiskey terms, it's got that salinity. That's what Manzanilla is. And it just works really, really well in whiskey, but not necessarily as what you would expect. It's not what you think of when you think of sherry. For me, this carries on all of those lovely citrus notes. It's got that doughy element to it. It's almost got an olive oil kind of element to it as well. So I think the reason that we like these casks, and I guess across all 3 of these releases, we've used Solera casks, we've used Bodega casks. So there's an element of when these opportunities come up, you can't pass them up because the casks are so rare. But why we like this style of whiskey is it just forces you to question what your thought of a sherry matured whiskey is and can be.
Because as I say, like for me, when I was saying I know my PXs and I know my Olorosos, but when I opened this the other day, straight away, I got a lot more sweeter notes, and I got a kind of apricot marmalade and orange marmalade and a little gooseberry undernote. But today it's got that little bit of that funkiness to it, like a tiny, not a dirtiness, but there's just something a bit more developed. And as you say, I think that's the slightly different process and how sherry can be so versatile in the making of it. And I've never tried it neat as you've got there. So I think for me to kind of get a little bit more knowledge is to get myself a bottle, try it side by side to get this is the raw material of what Manzanilla is. Obviously the side of Tomatin, for instance, legacy or just refill bourbon casks that are used there to get the DNA. Because I think that's one of the big things as well. The DNA of the spirit still comes through without overpowering, especially that because this is a 2-year finish in the Manzanilla.
So on the Manzanilla, you've got a 10-year-old with a 2-year finish. So 8 years in refill casks and then 2 years in the Manzanilla. And that's, that you tap into something that I would recommend every whiskey fan to do. Drink sherry. And I'm not saying that from the point of view of the more sherry you drink, the more casks we get. I'm saying it from the point of view of someone who loves whiskey. I fell in love with sherry through my love of whiskey. I was fortunate enough to go to Jerez a couple of times with some pals from other distilleries who all had an enjoyment of this style of wine, but a real kind of eagerness to learn more. And what we found in Jerez was the love that we have of the history and the storytelling and the kind of the sense of place that single malt has. Sherry's got that, but more importantly, that kind of wild diversity of flavor that single malt has, sherry has it in abundance as well. And so I recommend everyone, even independently of the whiskey, go and try these different styles of sherry. And once you've got an understanding of them, sit down and do what I'm doing here. Try them side by side.
Yeah.
See where the flavors are, because if you've never tried a Manzanilla before, you can smell this and go, oh, this is a lovely whiskey, but you'll not really know what flavors are coming from the distillation process and the refill casks and what flavors are coming from the sherry. Trying them side by side, that incredible kind of dusty, sweet tomatin maltiness is in abundance, but then you've got that lemony, citrusy vibrance from the Manzanilla layered on top of that. And I think what we talked about when you were at the distillery is that for me, when it comes to making a tomatin, I'm looking for a lovely kind of intermingling of distillery character and maturation character. I hate, if anyone refers to a tomatin whiskey as a sherry bomb, I hate it, because for me, if you're calling it a bomb, you've obliterated the distillery character.
Yep.
And it could be a spirit made anywhere. It might still be a lovely whiskey, but it's not a tomatin. And so for us, we're wanting the tomatin element to be there, and there'll be common themes throughout all three of these whiskies. And then the finishing process allows us to layer in the flavors from those casks.
Seen what's that? Pete had saying he's tried sherry several types. Not for me, except maybe a PX. We uses cough syrup. Sorry, Scott.
That's all right.
Reyes just came in saying, evening, good to see you, thanks for popping in. Yeah, just a few people in just now, so say any questions on it, especially that side. So I think for me now, it's 100%. I need to go and buy a Manzanilla and try it just as on its own. Is it something that you could sit and sip on a glass all night, or is it, because PX can be that, a small amount, just have an aperitif after dinner, or is a Manzanilla something that you could sit and sip a glass of? Is there a difference in that style?
For me, there is. I mean, I think the one thing I'd say to anyone trying sherry at home, I mean, the best way to learn about sherry, go to Jerez and experience it. But unfortunately, it's probably everyone's had their summer holiday already. If you're buying a bottle of sherry, put it in your fridge. Sherry should be drunk cold.
Right.
Put it in a wine glass. It should be drunk out of a wine glass. Try and pair it with food. I mean, sherry is made for eating with. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think one of the people in Jerez told us if it swims, it's Fino or Manzanilla. If it clucks, it's Amontillado. And if it moves, use Oloroso. So there's different types of food for different types of sherry for different types of food. I bought this bottle of Manzanilla on Saturday at the Whiskey Fringe. And last night I put the kids to bed. It was still lovely outside. And I sat down and I had 2 glasses of it in the same way that I would drink 2 glasses of wine. It's just, that's the way you can drink Manzanilla. I think for me, when it gets to so the Oloroso and they get a little bit heavier, I'll maybe stick to 1. And then when it's Palo Cortado, it's almost a dessert, for me, Palo Cortado, if you put that on ice cream, that's where you're really, really laughing. So yeah, there's different ways of drinking each style, but a Fino and a Manzanilla can be enjoyed on a nice warm night. We don't get many of them here, but it's just like a lovely glass of dry wine.
No, it's completely changed since I get excited with whiskey and I just open it and I pour it and I try it. I don't sit and wait, and sometimes I know I should, because whiskey can completely open up. A lot of people say a tight neck pour, and I wouldn't say it's a tight neck pour. It's just opened up and went, okay, this is my time to shine. I'm going to show you what Manzanilla can do to a tomatin spirit, and especially that 2-year finish is, for me, I really enjoy it, and I don't know what I'm enjoying about it because I don't know much about Manzanilla, but it seems like something that I like. It's a style of whiskey that I like, and the only other thing I've had is a Fino, but I think it was a Cohoman Fino, so a total polar opposite distillate, peated, high ABV, and that was a bit dirtier and funkier, but this seems to be, it doesn't have that full funky note to it. It's just a nice balance, and I think it's it's a style now that I'm totally going to be out in a, in the Bon Accord or the Pot Still when I'm in Glasgow or the Malt Room in Inverness and just have a look. Have you got something in the Manzanilla? I want to try different styles now, because there could be longer finishes, maybe shorter finishes, but the colour of it as well, right? That's got to be majority from the Manzanilla and not from that. Because for me, straight away, when you've pulled your wine glass up there, I didn't even know Manzanilla was light in colour, a white kind of wine style looking. So to see that in comparison to what you've got in your glass kind of now makes sense to me visually that it's a beautiful colour, and I love to put swirl a glass, and the legs on it are still there. There's longevity to it and things. But the nose is I could sit and smell this and not finish it. There's a wee fruit fly in here, so I've just came up with an idea that I'm not going to finish all of them in the glass. I'm going to let the fruit fly decide at the end what whiskey is going to be the whiskey of the night. But I'm going to leave a little bit of that because I like to try and smell them side by side. Even though I've got them all here, I can pour another one if I want. It's not that. But it's cracking, and it's been a kind of good decision for yourself. Because were you in between choosing Manzanilla for this one or Fino or a different style, or was it always like, I think this is going to be the one we're going to go for?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I like about Manzanilla is, as well as it challenging what you maybe think of as a sherry maturation, much like when we've matured Tomatin and Fino casks, it takes the Tomatin spirit in a way that we don't normally see. If we use an Oloroso or a Port or a Madeira, Tomatin goes to the sweeter side. I think what I like about this is, yes, there's some sweet flavours there, but there is more of a savoury note that you maybe don't get all the time. For me, there's almost like a salted popcorn, like cinema style popcorn thing going on. And that's something that we don't see too often. So when it came to looking at this collection, we've got quite an array of sherry cask matured whiskies, different styles of sherry cask, different age points. So it was really a case of, we knew we wanted 3 different ones. And it was going and finding, what's the 3 best. So if that was going to be a Fino and a Amontillado and an Oloroso, that's what we would have done. Yeah. So that was a great process. Let's go and find the best sherry matured whiskies that we've got. But I think what's interesting about this, and it kind of goes back to the way we deal with sherry casks as a whole, when we're looking at Tomatin core range products. So we buy the majority of our sherry casks from a cooperage in Montilla, which is to the north of the Sherry Triangle, a cooperage called Toneleria Juan Pino. And, it goes back to what you were saying about the trust thing and the faith thing. Yes, we can go out to Jerez and see how sherry's made and see the casks, but we need a great partner supplier there to help us out. And so when it comes to our core range, we need consistency. We need the 12-year-old to taste like the 12-year-old, the 18-year-old to taste like the 18-year-old. So predominantly for those whiskies, we're using seasoned casks. And I think the first thing there is seasoned casks are not worse or inferior to Solera casks. They're not better. They're just different. They're a different thing. And if we look at how sherry casks were delivered to Scotland in the past, they were more like the seasoned casks than they were the Solera casks. So up until in the 1980s, that's when the law changed that you had to bottle sherry in Spain. Up until that point in time, casks were being sent to the UK, but it wasn't the casks that the sherry had been matured in. The sherry would be matured in Soleras that had sat there for 100 years, and then they would fill transport casks, and that's what was sent to Scotland. So these casks maybe had sherry in them for a period of months. They were emptied, the sherry was bottled, and then the casks went to the distillers. So seasoned casks are more like that. But what's different today is the level of control that we have, as a distiller, have over those casks. So we decide the oak variety. So that can be Spanish oak, European oak, American oak. We decide the treatment, the kind of heat treatment. We'll decide what style of sherry goes into those casks and for how long, and it'll be matured. It'll be sherry wine matured in Jerez. It's not this kind of sacrificial wine that people talk about, and it's wine that goes on to become sherry. So it's the authentic stuff. And that's what we'll use for our core range, because that can deliver consistency. But every so often, Juan Pino will get in touch and say, we've got a Solera here from a bodega. This bodega is looking to retire a Solera. Would you be interested in those casks? And as I say, those opportunities come around so rarely that myself and Graham were a little bit like kids in a sweetie shop when that happens, and we leap at the opportunity. So that's what's happened with all three of these expressions. So not only was it a case of picking the best sherry, matured whiskey, it was also a case of let's see what these Solera casks can do and when they're fully unleashed. So the Manzanilla casks, and I'm not allowed to name names of the bodegas.
Yep.
Keep an eye on Instagram, because when I'm doing sherry and whiskey pairings, there's a good chance I'll be pairing them with the exact wine.
Yeah.
But these Manzanilla casks, on their last run, had held the Manzanilla for 10 years before it had gone on to be bottled. So we've got a lovely 10-year-old Manzanilla cask coming over to the distillery. The Palo Cortado is, from what I can understand, a Solera that has held wine for 30, 40 years.
Wow.
Before it's been used by us. And the Palo Cortado one's a really interesting one. These came out right after the pandemic kind of kicked off in 2020. This is when they were made available to us. And I think that's why they were made available, because normally, the owner of this bodega also is affiliated with a whiskey brand in Scotland. So there would be no reason for them to offer them to us, because that distillery should have taken them.
Yeah.
But 2020, I think all distillers will admit that their purse strings were kind of tightened because nobody knew what was going on. And we were getting offers for casks left, right, and centre and rejecting them and rejecting them, rejecting them. And then this offer for Palo Cortado casks came up, and there was a very, very brief email exchange between myself and Graham that immediately, within the hour, we had ordered these casks and found budget, as Graham always puts it. So he had something up his sleeve for a sunny day, and the Palo Cortado casks were that. Palo Cortado is such a rare style of sherry. I think
is
only
it a
about
happy accident? Is it like it's not? You can kind of manipulate it now, but the real deal was like is it something to do with I don't know, some oxidization or something in the cask, and the X on the cask or something as well means something. That's when you know it's a Palo Cortado, is it?
That's right. Yeah. So Palo Cortado will start off as a Fino wine. It will start off, and we're talking here about the kind of traditional Palo Cortado. As you say, it can be manipulated a little bit now, because wine science is understood so much more now than it was historically. In the same way that things that were maybe a happy accident in whiskey 50 years ago are now things that we can manipulate. But I still like the romanticism, and I like the story. And the first time I learned about Palo Cortado was in a bodega in Jerez, and I was taken to one of those casks with the cross through it, and the sherry was drawn from the cask. And the cellar master was trying to explain Palo Cortado, and my kind of geeky brain was like, "But how does it happen?" And he looked at me. He looked at me, and he just sort of said, "It doesn't matter. It just is." And I love that. Like, okay, keep your secrets, But essentially, Palo Cortado starts as a Fino. So it starts under this layer of yeast called flor. And much like whiskey, every cask reacts differently and behaves differently. And what will happen is that at some point in time, this flor will start to degrade and die. And the cellar master will be sampling casks, and he'll notice that this cask has started to oxidize. So it started to mature in the way that an Oloroso or an Amontillado would. And at that point, he'll come and he'll cross a mark on the cask. So Palo Cortado in Spanish literally means cut stick. So you've got a line on the cask for the Fino, and he'll come along and he's analyzed it. It's got the characteristics of something that could become a Palo Cortado, and he'll cross the stick. He'll Palo Cortado. And so then this wine eventually will be fortified further. So Fino wine is fortified to about 15%. Palo Cortado and Oloroso are 17%. So this has started off at 15%. The yeast has died, and then they've fortified it again. I guess this is where this differs to Amontillado, is that Amontillado, the yeast is killed by fortifying the wine, whereas with Palo Cortado, the yeast dies and then the wine is fortified. So it's slight variations in what they become. But in terms of rarity, Palo Cortado is, from what I can understand, maybe 3% of the grapes used for sherry become Palo Cortado. It's so incredibly rare, and it's that kind of magical thing that I think, again, the reason that people love Scotch whisky is some of these kind of happenstance stories that make it an incredible thing, and that's what Palo Cortado is. And the flavors that Palo Cortado as a wine has, it kind of dances between a Fino and an Oloroso. It's got some of the depth that an Oloroso has. It's got some of that backbone, but it's got more of those vibrant kind of citrusy elements that a Fino wine would have.
I've just poured it here, so I've just opened it and I've got it in the glass. The colour straight away is different. This is 15-year-old 2008, and still 46%, non-chill filtered, natural colour. And again, that'll be another finishing period of, is that 3, 4?
We've gone for 3 here. I think it works at about 3.5, and then by the time the cask came in 2020 and we filled them, it's left us with a 3.5-year finish. We actually got a decent number of these casks because, like I say, we pretty much bought an old Solera. So we filled some of these casks with new make spirit as well, but we wanted to mature some of that whiskey that was entering its teens in the refill casks in these casks. Tomatin, when it gets to that 12, 13-year-old mark in refill casks, starts to get really kind of your apples, pears, moving into the tropical. And I think the Palo Cortado for me here, it reminds me of like bonfire toffee, that kind of cinder toffee, and like burnt orange peel and things like that. Spices.
It's stunning on the nose. That's like, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like, I definitely got that it's a more softer kind of toffee. It's a toasted, I don't want to say nutty, I don't know what that is. It's like chocolate sprinkles and, not chocolate sprinkles, but that kind of froth on top of a coffee. I get that quite a lot with some sherry notes and things, that kind of frothiness that's got, and there's just a bit of chocolate put on top of your cappuccino.
Yeah.
But there's that underlying fruit, there's that still, the kind of softer, that DNA, the Tomatin DNA still comes through in this. 46%, it's like, it's a nice nose, right? There's nothing offensive in this. But that, it's not the word soft, but I think with the age of it, it's, it's taken to the casks. I always, when I used to explain age in whiskey, if you have a young whiskey, it's like, right, calm down sometimes if it's cask strength, and you need to calm down. If you've got a child that's running about, like, calm down, then it gets to this teenage years of 10 and 12 and 15, it's like, right, come on, just watch what you're doing. When it gets to 18, you're hoping it's a bit more, right, I know what I'm doing now, mum and dad, I won't annoy you, and it just settles down completely, and you can get this kind of good number.
Yeah.
But with this here being 15, it smells kind of older, if that, for me, it's got a kind of olderness to it, and if this is put in front of me, I don't know, I think this is an older whiskey, but I like that nose. I can't get away from that kind of soft chocolate toffee.
Aye.
The underlying fruit, the kind of your more white fruits underlying note. And again, that'll be a refill casks into the finishing time. Yeah.
I think, when you're talking about how the spirit matures throughout Tomatin, we see that as well. For me, generally speaking, and there'll be outliers and whatnot, but if we're making a rule, up to about 10 years old, the Tomatin spirit's going to give you a lot of citrus notes. It's going to give you a lot of lemon and kind of fresh orange. As you move into kind of 10 to 20 years old, and again, there'll be differences, that's where you're in the world of kind of apple, pear, peaches, those orchard fruit. And then from about 20 years onwards, that's when we start to see those kind of tropical, heavier notes develop. And I think this has got, like you say, it's got those fleshy white fruits there underneath it, but they're almost cooked. For me, it's like a cooked apple. It's like apple pie. It's pear crumble. It's got that kind of sweet toffee note on top. It's this. When it came to looking at casks and drawing samples, this is the one I was most excited about as well, because it's the first time we've ever used Palo Cortado casks, and it's the first time we've ever released them. And there's always that moment of, you're using a new cask for the first time. God, I hope it works. Because if it doesn't, you've got these incredible casks with an incredible story that you're not able to tell in the way you want to.
There's so much going on for me. I don't know if I've just opened it, but there's so much changing. It's as if the wind's going all different directions. I just got a kind of soft mint note there now, and
yeah,
I don't know where that's kind of came from.
I'm glad you said that, because when you were talking about that, like, soft toffee at the start, I got a kind of minty eucalyptusy note that I hadn't had before, and I thought I might be off on that, but I think
like that as well. It's just and I think with other sherry whiskies, it's just sweet and it's tasty, but this is like a step up of. This has got so much going on. You can't just drink this and be like, "Oh, I like it." It's like, well, what is that? And you go back, and I think this is going to be a changer over, completely over time. This will develop even more.
Yeah,
but I mean, just sit and knows that.
This for me, I think over time gets fruitier and fruitier. But the one that I go back to a lot with this reminds me of a crunchy, that kind of honeycomb, milk chocolate. There's that kind of nutty element there. It's not the nuttiness that I associate with Manzanilla. When I'm talking about the nuttiness there, I'm looking at almost more like marzipan-y, almondy macadamia. This has got that kind of Brazil nut. It's got the walnut, the pecan element to it.
And then, so one of my favourite things to do is like smell whiskies side by side. Yeah, I know they're two different animals, but you can totally then smell. This is what Manzanilla does. This is Palo Cortado. They're not the same thing at all. And having that, that's wild, just that difference. And Palo Cortado is just a total one again because of the rarity of it, right? We're not spoiled that every day we can go out and just buy a bottle of whiskey, which for a reasonable price at every other time. It's hard to get, especially for good. I think the only one I've got. Actually, Whiskey and Wine Trails, Tom is in, had gifted me a bottle of the Old Perth Palo Cortado cask strength. So that's the only one I've had. And I was Roy Aquavite, when I was round at his a few years ago, was a Deanston 1997, I think. And that was game changing. It was like, totally, what on earth is Palo Cortado? This is, whoa. And from there, it was a total, I'll buy one of these 1997 Deanstons. I've not got a checkbook big enough, I don't think, because everyone's enjoyed it in the same way. But I think this has got the slight similarities from what I remember. I'm just enjoying nosing this. It's dry on the palate. It's got a long finish to it as well. It's, since I think I've been talking for the last 5 minutes, I've not had to go back because I'm not chasing flavour. That longevity of, some whiskies you can go, well, that's amazing, disappears, and then before you know it, you're back up to buy another dram because you've enjoyed it, but it's just missing. This has got so much longness. It's a bit oily, and for 46% as well, to have all that characteristics in the one bottle is it's bizarre to me. Like, I can't believe how that's stuck to this so well. And again, that could be how Palo Cortado can create itself in the DNA within a whiskey to be like, okay, we've got a good nose now, try this, and you can sit and chat for ages and not have to go back up and buy another one. I probably would though, but
yeah. But like you say, I think with the Manzanilla you've got a drinker, and with this you've got a bit of a thinker, which is handy because there's far less bottles of this in the world. I think that's another thing with the sherry collection compared to the past, where there was equal number of bottles. The Manzanilla, I think we've got around about 10,000 bottles, but with this, it's just 6,000. And then you go into the PX and it's less than 3. So you're wanting that whiskey to hang about longer and be a bottle that you maybe have on the shelf a little bit longer than the first time. But going back to what you were saying about the kind of comparing them side by side, I think it's not only just the immediate kind of, this is what a Manzanilla does and this is what a Palo Cortado does. For me, we nosed and tasted the Manzanilla for about 20 minutes there. And, you get to that point of thinking, I've discovered everything I'm going to about this whiskey. You then spend 10 minutes with the Palo Cortado. And because you've been exposed to so many different flavors, you go back to the Manzanilla and it's totally different from when you first smell it. It's almost like a little cheat code. I quite like two things when I'm writing tasting notes. If I'm writing tasting notes on whether it's one product or one cask, I'll always have another dram beside me so that I can then almost unlock more tasting notes. But also when I'm doing a tasting, I quite often, whatever the first whiskey is, I'll maybe also chuck it in the lineup as the third or fourth whiskey as well. So, because what tends to happen is you go at the end and go, of the 6 whiskies, what was your favourite? And the vast majority of people will just rule out number 1 immediately.
Yep.
For many reasons. I think the first one is you've gone from 0% alcohol to 40+%, and then from there you're going up a couple of percent, so it's a bit more aggressive. And then you maybe forget about it by the end of the night. So quite often what I'll do is I'll have Legacy as number 1 and number 4, and at the end, maybe nobody's put their hand up for number 1, but a good 25% of the room put their hand up for number 4. It's the same thing, but it's just you're tasting it in a different order. You're getting the flavors in a different way of delivery.
And it's not a way of, it's definitely not catching people out, and I totally agree. From tastings I've done, it's you get a couple of hands up for for number 1. And I think when I was down at Robbie's Drams, and the first was the Italian collection, it wasn't the Barolo, it was one of the other ones anyway, the Sauternes maybe, and it's a fantastic dram, but because it was first, that kind of mid 3 onwards was where you're starting to see people go, that's the ones I remember, my palate is ready, because I had a palate cleanser to start, because I know I didn't want to just come in, and the first time sometimes you try whiskey and as you say, your palate's just kind of getting a bit of alcohol, right? You're missing out on all the flavour, and you go, oh, it's just okay. So you revisit it after a couple of sips, and your palate's like, okay, we know what's going on, let's open our taste buds and start seeing what's going on here. Yeah. And I think it's not tricking anyone at all. It's just a good way to show that this whiskey is really good, and now you can see why that number 1 and number 4 is the same whiskey, but you enjoy it because your appetizers went for it, or whatever you want to call it. And this is, I can't stop kind of nosing that as well. And I think once I pour the last one and kind of go through the 3 of them, it's just going to completely change again. I've just seen who's just popped in there. So Danny's just said he's poured a Tomatin Fino 2006, the 13-year-old belter of a dram.
Yeah.
Whiskey friends saying Palo Cortado, the big guns are out. I think Jeff's in. Jeff Whiskey's in. Good to see you, buddy. Hopefully you've got a wee dram in hand as well. What else have we got? Who else is saying this? It keeps jumping away here. So Whiskey and Wine Trails, Tom, he's coming over to Scotland. It's actually this week. I think he's got a week and he's here for 3 weeks. So I'm meeting up with him. He's coming home from Arizona as well. So I think we're kind of going to do more local distilleries here. And then I'm coming up at the end of the month with Hillary's mum and dad. We'll pop up and see. Who else? What have I missed? That's fine. I'm going to open this now. The last one in the collection, the PX 2006 17-year-old. And I say, it was so difficult for me not to open these. When I spoke to you the other day, I was like, I'll do one, and I'm so happy I can get them open now, and we'll see what kind of good pop we get. Are you like me? So see, every time you open a whiskey, I always tip it upside down just to wet the cork. It's just a thing so it doesn't cork or crack.
Right.
And then you get that. That's one of the best I've ever had. And
that's like a good high five, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You're aiming for that every time, but it rarely happens.
So this is, again, all the same ABV. And this one's got a long finish, right? I think this is the longest of the 3 in this is PX, right? And PX is quite big in the whiskey world. So I've got this I've actually got this one in my Tomatin glass. I've put this one in. But the colour of that's just magic as well. For
the old 2013 Glasgow Whisky Festival glass here.
I've got one of them down here somewhere as well in my bucket of glasses. But the colour of So this is
This is a long
Ximénez.
thing.
Oh, so it's this one here.
So with a 17-year-old here with a PX, what you've got is a 7-year finish. So it's been 10 years in refill casks and then 7 years in PX. And that's when you get people asking, is that a finish anymore? I still think it is. I think for me, for it to be a double maturation, it's got to have been in the second cask longer than it was the first cask.
Right. Yeah.
But I've also heard it argued that if to be a whiskey, you've got to be 3 years in a cask, then surely a finish ends at 3 years and a double maturation begins at 3. I like that as well. But for me, this is still, I would call this a 7-year finish. And then, people are like, what? That's mad. This is cool for a number of reasons. We had a PX matured in the Quattro series, and that was a 12-year-old with a 3-year finish. And then quietly in the background for many years, there's been PX single casks available in the visitor centre.
Yeah,
and
been phenomenal.
They've been ridiculous. And around about 2018, 2019, before the pandemic, Scott and Bart over in the States, the Scottish Test Dummies, one of our casks won their double sherry shootout against the likes of Macallan's and Aberlour's and Glenfarclas. And that kind of sparked almost like a cult following of all of our PX bottlings. The following year, we took a small cask to the Whisky Fringe, and people could bottle their whiskey from the cask, and that became the spirit of the Whisky Fringe. So it's always been like a whiskey lover's dream, this one. But we've never had the volume, so to speak, to release one of these long PX finishes as a general release. And I say, I don't even think we've got the volume now. This is 2,900 bottles split over 60 countries worldwide. I think it works out at about 45 bottles a country. It's not a huge amount.
Yeah.
But what it is just magnificent. This is a PX cask being used to its full extent, much more than this. And you're moving into that sherry bomb territory. I think there's still an element of tomatin coming through there. But what I love about sherry, what I love about PX, it's the sweetest natural wine in the world. It's about 450 grams of residual sugar per litre. That's like 3 times the sugar of Coca-Cola. And you pour it out and it pours like treacle. But a lot of the flavours that I associate with PX are things that if you say you think bitter. I think of dark chocolate. I think of espresso. I think of tobacco. Those are the things that spring to my mind when I think of PX, and I think that's what this whiskey does really well. There's sweetness there. There's treacle sweetness, but there is that darker, deeper flavour that I think tomatin in a PX cask showcases so well.
It just seems like the kind of marriage is perfect. And going back to Scott and Bart, that was 2019, I'm sure, and we done a blind tasting in the Good Spirits company with Roy. It was after the Glasgow Whisky Festival the day before, whatever it was. Every year there's always something on with that, and it won. The Tomatin was the one there, and that's what started it all for them. And they're like, we need more of this, and I think that was a total just bottling. We at Roy's as well kind of went through it quite quickly. And I remember being up there in March. I loved it again. I think the PX was there, but for some reason the Virgin Oak, for me, I was just like, that's gone. Yeah. That's been shared and finished. So when I come back up, I'll need to pick another one up because I just love that style. But again, when you look at PX, especially for this age, you expect to not be able to see through the bottle, right? And it's still sorry, that's the wrong one. It's one at the front. I've switched them around. But you can still see through that. It's not this jet black super. This is just sherry in a bottle. And I think one of the best things I like and love about tomatin is the DNA is always still going to come through. It's not a case of never hide it. What's the point of hiding it? It's this is what you do. This is what we are. Why change the flavour profile of it? You always want to pick up those just natural notes from what you get, and I think you can. I've not tried it yet because I keep nosing it. Again, it's got another nose. I've got a soft kind of leather note there as well on it.
But that goes back to what we showed you at the distillery there, Kevin. Is like we go to quite some effort to get great new make spirit. We're not just banging the stuff out. It's really long fermentation. It's only Scottish barley. We're really slow in our distillation. Even when it comes to the faints, we're distilling them really slowly. Even saw some of the faces of the guys that make the stuff and spoke to them. If we were to just ram this in a PX cask from birth, just to appease people that say, I like PX matured whiskey, I like really, really dark whiskey, and this is a dark whiskey, but it's not jet black, we'd be doing so much of a disservice to all of the work that goes into getting the spirit. And I think, over the last 5-10 years, the whiskey industry, and ourselves included, have focused so much on the stories of the casks that it takes whiskey a little bit away from what makes it so special, and that's the place that it's from. The reason that single malt has this kind of connection with people that blend perhaps doesn't is because it comes from a place and time. And to move away from that just for the sake of a slightly darker colour would be a real shame.
Yeah, I think that was when we tried the new make, and that's something I always ask when I go to the distillery. I love to try new make from distillery because this is what the whiskey is, right? And it's onto the wood, and then it's into the bottle.
Yeah.
And I think when we done it, I said it was the first one I'd ever had that rhubarb, kind of granny's rhubarb, and everywhere else I get kind of peach, a lot of kind of peach melba notes, strawberry laces and things, but I just couldn't get away from this amazing kind of fresh rhubarb pie and things. I was totally taken away from it. And I think that's maybe, you'll know better, is it something to do, because what's 168 hours, 165 to 169 hours fermentation time to give us something like that? Because it was totally different. I say I've never tried a new make like it. And I was loved it.
The rhubarb thing, it's one that leaps out to me all the time. It's not something that we necessarily reference a lot because I don't think rhubarb translates very well. So
Scottish only, right? It's a kind of
yeah. I mean, I know it because it grew in my granda's garden, and a treaty was a bag of sugar and a stick of rhubarb, or if you were doing really well, he'd make a crumble. So I get the rhubarb really clearly in the new make spirit. I actually get it almost more in the still house than I do in the glass. When we're in that building and we're in the heart of the run, you get that waving off the distillery. And yeah, I think it's all things. I think, to kind of pinpoint it and say it's from the fermentation or this or that or the next thing is really difficult. I think the fermentation is probably the biggest element of that. That's where we're going to get those fruity flavors. We tried the wash as well, and it's got that kind of tangy gooseberry element, that sourness that a rhubarb has. Rhubarb's not an overtly sweet fruit. Don't even think it's technically a fruit. But so you get that sour element in the wash, but you get this incredible fresh fruit. So I would say that's probably the main area of where that comes from. And that really, really long fermentation is a huge, huge part of that. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your views of rhubarb, it's not a flavour that really carries through to the whiskey at all. Even after 3 years in a cask, it's very much gone. But in the new make, it's right up there.
You think, quite in the distillery sense, that there's a cooper on site, that the wood policy, and if we go back to the 60s and having the biggest producing distillery in Scotland for, was it 12 million litres or so, that it was a more kind of quantity over quality. Then we fast forward into the 70s and potentially liquidation and bought over by the Japanese firm who's still there, is it Takara Shuzo? Always get this back to front. And the policies came in, and I love this the new saying that Tomatin do as well, to what matters. And I think that's, everything's now came into place like this. We trust the full process of what goes on about how we produce our new make, how our wood policy goes. You're able to not just phone people and buy cask, you're able to go and visit these, bodegas and things and say, oh, this works for our style. And you're not just picking up phones and phoning people. So I think for how big a distillery was to now being, is it 2.1 million litres annually, with everything on site as well, and the 2 new warehouses being built, is everything's coming back to this is who we are and what we love. And in a sense, like, Tomatin isn't the biggest name. It's weird, right? For me, it's bizarre how to be in the 60s, the biggest distillery to then come down, but it's just trending in the complete right direction, and an accessible distillery from, if you try to drive north, you have to visit it, right? You have to go by it. It's there. It's an easy stop off, and one of the nicest welcomes I think I've had in a distillery as well. In that wee shop, everyone just it's a cool wee spot, and I think maybe for me being quite lucky to be in behind the scenes for those few days and seeing it from a total different perspective, and it's no one was ever like, "Oh, here's more people coming to see us. Like, how you doing? Would you like to see this?" And they were so engaging. And I think it more of a kind of corporate side. It would be just like, "Oh, get out of the way, I'm working." Everyone took their time out, and I think that whole kind of union of everyone being together and understanding that Tomatin is this big family, it is what we look at. Everyone's involved, and everyone just looked happy, which is a big thing as well at distillery, and that just comes from, speaking to Graham. He's just coming out with his big thick Highland accent, and listen to my Ouija accent, try to talk to him. I think we were both like, "What? Yeah, we'll just nod and give a wee thumbs up, and we both understand." We've got a kind of like, "Yeah, we're understanding it. We don't understand each other. It's fine." And I just love that kind of quality that everything's got from the distillery, and I'm not just saying it. It has generally been the warmest welcome I've been to, and everyone loves it, and especially being able to, some of them living literally 50 metres away from the front door. And I think you lived there for a while as well, did you not? You were quite close by.
I lived there for 4 years. I think going back to what you're saying about some of the stuff that we have on site, and that transition from being the biggest in like the 60s and 70s to now being a small operator, but doing so much of it, that goes back to what matters. We talk about things like the cooperage, we talk about the houses on site, we talk about the fact that every cask is matured on site. In the 60s and 70s, that was a necessity. Those things were developed by necessity. Absolutely. If you were producing 12.5 million litres a year, you needed cooperages on site. You needed your warehousing. You needed your staff there. Whereas now, we're producing far less whiskey, but we realised these things are so important to creating what Tomatin is. So even to this day, every drop of whiskey that you see in a bottle of Tomatin has been fully matured at the distillery on site under, probably under Richard Noble's eyes. He's been there for 50 years now as our head warehouseman. For the last 50 years, he's been in and out of those warehouses. It's an incredible thing. What I understood working there was just that incredible sense of community. And I think when we talk about community today, it's not the people that live on your street typically. We talk about the whiskey community. It's people that come together over something they love. It's not just people that live nearby because for whatever reason that doesn't really exist. But for me, it was this place was the reason. This distillery was the reason that everyone was there. You would help your neighbour out with the snow at 3 o'clock in the morning and stuff like that if they needed out their drive. That was a really personal story to me. But everyone kind of is brought together by the fact that they live and work for this spirit to be produced. And it's an incredible, incredible thing. I love hearing people who have a great experience of coming to the distillery. And I heard so much of that at the Whiskey Fringe at the weekend, because Tomatin by no means is the most pretty distillery in the world. You can't go from being the biggest distillery in the world in the 70s to being a nice little quaint cottage-looking thing. And even Graham Unson, our master distiller, he'll refer to it as a distillery only a mother could love. And we did make it a little bit more aesthetic, but it will always be, a big site. It will always be quite industrial in nature. And I think there's that beautiful juxtaposition of going into what is quite an industrial building with someone that's full of joy and energy and wanting to tell you about this little place. For me, I like to look at the building and see how it's moved and grown and expanded over time. But how, as I say, we've not been making whiskey the same way for 125 years. But the values underneath it, that kind of that dedication to a singular goal, that's always been there. And today that singular goal is on quality and on making whiskies that people want to pick up and drink,
I've got Dutch Jura. Has said, I highly recommend a tour of Tomatin. The tasting is absolutely excellent, as well as the core range. I love the Cabokken, and I think I also love the Cabokken. I'm a big fan. I've still not tried Antiquary. it's still something that I need to get into. You know, it's not a case of I've just never had it there, and I think the rebrand and everything's really cool, and it's going to kind of boom again. It's one of the biggest sellers back in your 60s and things, but the Cabokin is a complete style, and I know it's made the same distillery, but they're trying to have Tomatin, Cabokin, and it's a slightly different, the more fun side of. And that day we went up into the moor and thing, and had it, and it was really cool. It was one of the drams I think I'd had, because you'll be able to tell me this. In fact, the oldest cask in the warehouse for Cabokin isn't relatively old in an extent to other products, right?
The Cabokin, the first distillation was 2005. So, if you're drinking the Cabokin 15-year-old right now, there is some of that 2005 spirit in it. It's from the earliest distillation. But I think you've touched on something there about the moor. I would love you to tell the story of you teaching the Chinese guys how to have a snowball fight. That's one of I've been telling everybody about this.
So we were up in Tomatin for 4 days for a kind of brand ambassador training program, and there was two, I can't remember their names now, I apologise.
Richie and Joe.
Yeah, so great guys, and all the way from China, yeah. And they do the kind of branding out there, and it's amazing. Like the videography that they do is amazing. So they come over, and one of the days we were doing was Cabokin. We go up into the moors in one of these estates with I can't remember the clan who owned that estate, the family anyway. And it was snowing for, obviously it's March, so the day before was sunny, then this day was snowing. And we go up, and it was to kind of learn about the story of Cabokin, and it means is it the white dog or the wolf, sorry. And we're up the top, and you couldn't really see because of the snow, but it kind of played in part of the whole Cabokin story, right? And it was amazing. But Richie, we were standing there and having our drams, and I think it was it Wouter that was standing somewhere. I think Wouter was standing across maybe 20 yards away. But Richie and I had never seen snow before. They've never seen snow, and they're in their late 30s, I think, or mid 30s as well. And it was bizarre because we just take it for granted, right? And from where they live in China, they've never had snow. And I was like, just throw a snowball at Wouter, because he wasn't looking. It'd be funny. Obviously, the Glasgow in me is like, it'll be funny to throw a snowball at someone. It's always funny, right? But they picked up and they didn't know what to do with it. And I was like, you make a circle like this and you throw it. But we had little kind of thermal cups that were having hot toddies in, and I showed him how to do it, and then Richie put it in his thermal, just sitting with it. And he's like, I'm going to take it home. I was like, no, Richie, you can't take it home, it'll melt. And he's like, huh, what? And I was like, no, it's snow, it's like kind of it'll ice. If you take it in the car, because the car's hot, it'll just turn into water. And it was just an amazing. I remember just having my hot toddy, just watching those two, and a complete. They didn't know how to react to snow, and again, and I think little things like that, and you can relate it back to whiskey in the sense that someone has a dram that they love that they've maybe never had before, and you can just tell that like there's an enjoyment there, and you don't want to jump in and get in their aura to be like, I'll tell you what to do. Just enjoy that moment. And I was lucky enough to be there to enjoy it. It was funny at the same time as it was, because we wanted to take a snowball all the way back to China, but we couldn't, obviously. I think I broke his heart a wee bit when I was like, no, this needs to stay. We'll come back and it'll always kind of be here. But I threw the snowball at Wouter in the end, I think, and nearly hit him. So, but we got some really cool, some cool pictures, and they got some really good pictures, and they loved it as well. But I think the cold, they finally went, it's cold as well. I was like, yeah, this isn't we don't want to be here hanging about too long, right?
It was one of the weirdest things, because like you say, the day before, it wasn't the nicest weather, but there was not a lick of snow in it. That morning we came down to the distillery, and it was only as we were driving up to the estate, the Tomatin's already at 315 metres above sea level, so we're going up to 500-600 metres. And it's only as we're driving that the snow starts coming down, but it's snowflakes the size of your hand. You know, it was. I've not seen it like that in a long, long time up here. And by the time we get to the estate, there's already a layer of snow. You guys go in for your lunch and whatnot, then up onto the hill, and it's thick at this point. And what was amazing was by the time you came back down, it had stopped snowing. And by the time we woke up the next morning, it had all melted. It was almost like this thing happened for that moment to happen, you know. And I like it because so much of the Kubokan story is that it's made for 1 week every winter.
Yeah.
So it was quite atmospheric for then having that Kubokan hot toddy. But I do remember picking you guys up at the bottom because I wasn't able to join and saying, "How did you get on?" And you're like, "I've taught the Chinese lad how to throw a snowball." And I was like, I love the mix of cultures from Cumbernauld to Guangzhou in that one moment.
It was phenomenal. It was amazing just meeting kind of everyone. Everyone was, and your man that gave us the Swiss RNA with the Tomatin on it as well. I've just totally forgot his name.
Yeah.
Apologies for that as well. But it was amazing to see. And I think, yes, you've got Tomatin, you've got this amazing kind of lighter spirit, which comes through amazing wood quality. Kubokan's got the like PT 20 ppm around about there. And then you've got your blend. You cover all bases in the sense that there's always going to be something that's going to appeal to someone. It's not just a case of this is all we've got. There is a wider spread of whiskey and different styles of whiskey. And I say that Virgin Oak for me, I think Simon Whiskey Novice was the same as well. We ended up buying a bottle of that because I've never smelt a cask like that in the distillery. So I hope there's still some left. I say when I go back up in the end of August, start of September, when we go up, I need to pick another one up because that one's gone. That's dehydrated, what we call it, for sure.
That fruit fly got into it.
Absolutely. So the thing was, it jumped into the last one there. It jumped into the PX,
right.
And you might have seen me looking down a few times. I was just kind of watching it. So it's took a wee. I don't know what it is now. It stopped flying, so it's drunk somewhere, and it's not. There's no extra protein in my glasses. Does anyone have kind of any question you'd like to ask about the new range? Is there any kind of questions about, you can buy this in most kind of specialist stores now, right? Again, because there's only a certain amount. As you say, I think the last one was at 2,900 bottles worldwide. It might sound a lot, but when you break it down to 45 a country, it's quite.
Yeah.
It's not a lot overall, and I think the Scottish Gantry. I think you guys have got a place in the Edinburgh store now. There's a big thing with that, so that you can get in. I know they've got the range. My question would be, how did it go down at the Fringe? There's 3 days. Was this what was the feedback on people's favourites and on the new range?
Yeah, it was really interesting. So I mentioned just before we went live at the Fringe, we had 2 stands next to each other. We had the Tomatin stand, and we had another stand that had Kubokan and Antiquary on it. And I was doing a lot of the work on Kubokan and Antiquary because they've actively been a really important part of what I've been doing whiskey making wise for the last few years. I was also responsible for picking these along with Graham, but these to a large extent are a vatting of casks that exist, whereas the Antiquary and Kubokan, there's an element of actually blending and creating in there. So I was speaking a lot about those, and I just kept hearing people coming over and trying the sherry collection. And what I loved about it, first of all, is it wasn't a rush to just try the old PX one. There was a genuine interest in all 3, and I loved seeing that. By about halfway through on the Saturday, so halfway through the show, someone had come up and was explaining to me how disappointed they were that the PX had already sold out by that point. So that was great to hear. But overall, I mean, I guess with everything, everyone's in such a good mood at these shows that everything goes down well. But I just really loved the kind of the exploration that people had about it. Palo Cortado, I've maybe tried that once before, or just the kind of what's a Manzanilla, and you're like, oh right, this is this really funky, dry style of sherry. So yeah, I think it was just that I was really not blown away because that's what these whiskey festivals exist for, but it was nice and it was reassuring that level of just kind of eagerness to learn and eagerness to try new things is still kicking about. It's the first time I've done a whiskey festival in the UK in over a year. Not by choice, but just by being busy doing other bits and pieces and traveling a lot more now. I missed the Whiskey Fringe last year. It's one of my favourite shows in the UK, so I made a point of going down. So it was great to see that's still an important thing, and the reaction was tremendous. So we can only wait and see what the sales were like on the day. But for me, a show like that, there's an element of we want to sell bottles, but there's also this is a great opportunity for people to come and try these products that otherwise they might not get the chance to.
So whiskey and wine shows, Tom said, I'd love to be able to try a dram of them while I'm there. While I find them at the Bond Pop Stores. Tom, you'll find them in my flat. So when the day that we meet up, we can jump in here and we can try them, because Tom's staying in Doon, just right beside Deanston Distillery. There's a kind of new kind of pub open with hotel. It's got 6 or 7 rooms in it. So he's staying right there. So he's going to be right around the corner. So Tom, you're more than welcome to try these whiskies for sharing, right? And I've got enough of it in here to have a dram here and there myself. So it'll be good to share it with you. So you're more than welcome when you come over. Alan's saying, I love the Tomatin and Sherry. It plays so well, but is there any plans to ever do an ex-bourbon Tomatin? Being selfish, it's my favourite style of whiskey. So I think you just, Alan's just looking at, is there just going to be a full, maybe aged ex-bourbon? I'll be able to try some of the ex-bourbon stuff when we were at the distillery, and it kind of, I think my shoes fell clean off me trying some of these things, because it's a fantastic style of whiskey. Ex-bourbon is just, I think that's what plays so well in these bottles here, because it's ex-bourbon right, and then into the finish. But it's a good question. I don't know if that's something you're able to answer. Is there something that's going to be in the pipeline for an aged, potentially ex-bourbon?
It was something that struck me at the Whiskey Fringe. Somebody came up and said, do you have anything matured in a bourbon cask? And I looked at the table and realised quite how sherry heavy this year was. We have the Sherry 12-year-old, which is a new addition to the core range.
Yeah.
But even if you look at the Tomatin 12 cask strength 18, there's a sherry element in there. Kubokken range is a little bit different. There's no immediate plans, but I'm waiting for the point in my head that we can get to where there's enough interest, because I think that's one of the things is like, for me, anytime someone comes and asks me what's your desert island style whiskey, 15-year-old Tomatin in a bourbon barrel, that's all I need to be a very, very happy man. But it's still not quite seen as the kind of quote-unquote sexy style. People want their sherries and their ports, and they want these experimental things. Tomatin works really, really well in a bourbon barrel. We've got it on some of the visitor centre exclusive casks and things like that. But I would love to get to a day where we have a 15-year-old Tomatin bourbon. Funnily enough, that was in the core range when I started at the company in 2012. So it's not my decision that it's gone, but I might be able to lean into that decision to bring it back.
There you go. Alan answered your question. So potential in the future to bring it in. As I say, the Virgin Oak was just a game changer for me. High ABV, I think it was 5.5 years at the time. Just a total phenomenal style of whiskey, so different. And the ex-bourbon stuff, as you say, 15 was in that kind of era. Yeah, unbelievable. It's a lot to do with the spirit and things as well. And as I say, folks, if you're going, the tour at Tomatin's amazing. You'll get some amazing tour guides like Libby Jo, super young, but she's the most knowledgeable person I've ever met. Like, I was learning so much from her. You'll get one of the biggest welcomes and warm welcomes, a cracking wee shop as well, and you're only 20 minutes away from Inverness city centre. So if you're staying and you're not too sure what to do, if you've got plans to go up north, easy enough to get there as well. Be buses and stuff, I think, that go down that route. Or if you've got a car, take your wee drive away, your wee takeaway taster packs with you as well. But yeah, I would definitely go. Because how is the warehouses up and running? Because I think when we were there in March, are they finished or just nearly finished that we're getting built?
I need to speak to Jamie, our distillery manager, but they're at the point of needing filled now, So so they're up, they're built. I I think they're just getting those kind of final checks and sign-offs and stuff. So I'm actually keen at some point this year, and I wanted to do it in the summer, and it's almost dead this summer, to actually spend a bit of time working in the warehouses again. It was something I did back when I started 12 years ago. And you just get a better sense of the place, when you've got that hands-on. I'm sure you guys kind of get an element of that, just even from spending half an hour filling casks. There's.
I could have done that all day. I just loved it. I thought that was just so cool, and I don't think it was a novelty. I don't think it would have worn off. And I said to you, I was like, whiskey completely baffles me because it's 3 ingredients and they all taste different, and it's it's governed so tightly. It has to be done specifically. You can't really colour outside the lines, and to have that, and just the environment, everyone was so nice. Your man that was letting us fill the cask, obviously we were trying to do it and not doing it as efficiently as like they're just laughing at us like, yeah, do this, and they're just going both. They've filled with 5 casks and we're doing 1. It's that environment. They're like, right, this is going here, that's going there, everyone's in tangent. I was like, oh, this is just so cool, and I would love to go back and do the same as you. So if you're needing a hand one of the days, let me know and I'll pop up and roll the sleeves up and get going. So this wee fruit fly's brought his wee pal now. So one of them's trying to break in. This wee guy's trying to break in to the Palo Cortado. Another wee guy's about to drown in the PX here. So he's found a wee friend and said there's some good whiskey in this room. Get yourself in. And I went two fruit flies to contend with. Quality. But if anyone's got anything else, so Dutch Europe, there is a new visitor centre being built. When will it be open? Is that because it's quite small, right? The visitor centre is quite a small thing. So in comparison to where that is just now, is it going to be in the same site, or is it going to move around to where the offices are? That big open space there.
That big open space. So the visitor centre right now is the distillery office from the 1960s. It's not a big building at all. We've expanded the offices, and then part of the reason for building the new warehouses is that we've knocked down a couple of the old warehouses out the back of the visitor centre, and in that space there, that's where the new visitor centre will be going. I believe the original plan was for 2025, but it might be moving back a little bit now, just with various kind of building projects and other bits and pieces that kind of things come up. When you knock a warehouse down, you realise actually you might need a bit more work here to get things ready. So yeah, it will be probably within the next 2 years. We'd like to have it up and running and get everyone in. So there's that kind of brilliant thing of let's go and see the old visitor centre, because that's eventually going to be knocked down, and that's where back when Tomatin was the biggest distillery in the world, that's where the decisions were being made. And there's again, this is my kind of history geeky element of the bricks and mortar have seen so much over the years that they're quite important as well. So absolutely pop in and see us right now, and then make a tour back round in a couple of years and see are all singing, all dancing. Yeah.
No, it's because just a new still just got put in as well, right? Was that literally the other week there, wasn't it?
Yeah. There's some new stills getting put in, some parts of stills getting taken away to be kind of refurbished and put back. But it's a funny thing. You look out the office. So I consider myself to be one of the luckiest brand ambassadors in Scotland, because my 9 to 5 is at the distillery, and it's a difficult thing because you'll sometimes see other ambassadors who've got their 1 week a month at the distillery posting content, and I'm like, it's not new to me. But I turned around out of the office building, I was looking out the window across the car park the other day, and honestly, if you didn't know what was going on, you would have thought aliens were landing, because it's the big boil, the kind of the body of the still is being lifted by a crane into the air, and it's just floating there. Like, aye, aliens are coming.
The Inverness Courier putting a new story out of aliens have landed from. Wee Jim's got a picture that he's put in for into the paper, because that is weird when you see it, because it's not a natural thing. Because if people don't know whiskey and they see that and they're like, "What is that? What are they doing there?" It's a total. If you know your whiskey, it's like, that's a still. Wonder where it's going when you're driving up the road, and you're like, I wonder where that's maybe stopping off. Because Alan McLaughlin's just asking, is that a new still or is it a reused still from somewhere?
No, so if we're ever getting new stills put in there are new stills. Our stills still to this, a lot of the word still, isn't it? To this day, they use the design that goes back to the 1890s. And the only reason, again, this goes back to almost taking things full circle, going back to that history element, is the guy that designed our distillery back in the 1890s only designed one other distillery. It was the original Speyside distillery. And there's a photo from their still house, and the stills are identical to what we have in Tomatin today. And you're like, that's the way this guy liked to make his whiskey, you know. So yeah, if we're getting new bits and pieces, it'll be from Forsyths over in Speyside. That's who we get all our copper from. I think, you know, when we say new still, 9 times out of 10, you're not replacing the whole element. You'll be replacing the neck or the lie arm or the boil chamber. Things wear at different rates and things like that, and that's why some things will be getting replaced and some things will be getting refurbished.
Nice. It's cool to see. It's not. It can never be the same forever, right? Wear and tear and things move on, and I think having the steel washbacks as well was one of the questions I asked you, and I thought that was, you know, it's quite rare to see that, but that's for a long fermentation. Because I think it was to do with the bacteria, that you've not got any control over the bacteria growth for such a long fermentation, right? But having that, you can completely control the product and the finishing product to keep it the same consistently. And then, you know, if your wood and your wooden washbacks every 30, 40 years has to change, that changes how the whiskey's going to mature, because it's not got the age in it. And it's, I just think Tomatin Story is it's really cool, and it's really different with changing the things and that long fermentation. I was like, no way, that's bizarre, because everyone else is a few days, and I was at Fetticare not that long ago, and there's a short kind of, I think 70 odd hours, you know, 2.5 days, 3 days. And yeah, Tomatin's just a wee bit longer than that, you know, and it's having these different styles of product, which is, it's pretty cool. Yeah. Alan Douglas is saying, I'll help you empty the casks if I can come along too. So he's looking for a wee worker to come and help and empty some casks. Quality. So if anyone's got any other questions or anything you want to touch on, Willie's saying, great informative chat, guys. Sounds like a first class drams. Methinks this quarter's budget may well be truly blown. So I think he's like the sound of all three. My takeaway is I need to go and buy a bottle of Manzanilla and try what that is, the kind of the raw material of it all. Yeah, which will be my next adventure at the weekend. I think I'll go out and find some, because that one you've got is from Leaf. I've seen that before. I have seen it, but I've just never thought. Do you know? I
think there's so many great Manzanillas out there. I like the Barbadillo Soler and things like that. They're just incredible Manzanillas. But I'm really impressed by this Portaleith Manzanilla. I'm just reading on the back of it. It's from Bodegas Baron. I love what they've done with this as well. You know, we talk about in whiskey so often about let's get whiskey drinkers enjoying sherry and things like that. What a brilliant way to do it. And actually, in terms of quality, if this was going to be the first Manzanilla you ever tried, it's a great place to start. It's a pretty good kind of, this is a Manzanilla. It's not like this is a funky Manzanilla or a salty. This is a good middle of the road Manzanilla. So I'd recommend it if you see it.
Nice. No, definitely. What sherry for each of you is your favourite style with Tomatin plays well the most often? So, sorry, what sherry for each of you is your favourite style with Tomatin and it plays well like most often? So, like my favourite kind of sherry style, I think so far with Tomatin has been that PX of 2019, because it was a total like blind tasting. No one knew what it was, and it was just an absolute hands up if this was your. And I think it was like the second as well. It wasn't like the fifth dram or whatever. I'm sure it was like the second dram. And that style, that single cask strength. Because for me, times whiskey, cask strength whiskey's great because you can always add water. You can never take it away, and you can kind of water it down to what you like. And for whatever happened with that cask and the ABV and everything, it just was the spot on. Literally, this Manzanilla, I'm totally. I am loving that, and again, it's so different, and I like it, but I don't know why. And I think that's why this is what for me. I'm like, I need to go and buy Manzanilla. I need to know what Manzanilla is in a raw state, and be like, that's why I like it. And so for me, just now, out of the three, they're all bloody quality. But that Manzanilla, I think, because it stands out more because I've never really tried Manzanilla, and I think that's why my mind's like, that's a bit different. The other two, you know, ask me tomorrow and I'm like, oh, the Palo Cortado, and ask me the next day and it's this, and it totally depends on your mood. But they just, again, I'm smelling them side by side, they're all changing.
I would echo you. I like when, so we all know what Oloroso casks do, you know, and they're used so much because they do it well. But I like when sherry casks can surprise you, and you know you can try something new. And I think the Manzanilla does that. I'm a big fan of the Palo Cortado, probably because I had quite a lot of hope behind it. We bought those casks at a time when there wasn't a lot of hope, you know, March of 2020. And I just love that the complexity of that style of sherry comes through into the whiskey. It's a whiskey that kind of leaves you going, you know, you can go back to it for an hour, half an hour, you know, and you're going to get something new. And that's what Palo Cortado is. It's just so complex. And then I love that carries over. It showcases really well in the whiskey.
Absolutely. That's the Palo Cortado longevity is just bizarre. How that just continues and continues on. But I think what I reckon I'll end up pouring another one of maybe the Palo Cortado and PX tonight, just to have them side by side and just get to know them a little bit more. But I think they're just going to open up even more and just develop completely differently. I think that for me as well, the bottle design, I'm a huge fan of. The etching in the back and stuff is just, it's a quality. It seems like a very high end product, right? And the etching on the top, which there's so many kind of cool things about it. And again, I think price point is spot on, because I think the Manzanilla retails around about 60 to 70, somewhere in that realm. For a product of what you're getting, right? The same with, I can't remember what the Palo Cortado, that's,
so it's 90.
90. And then
you know, I had a look online today. You'll get the Manzanilla for about 59 quid. You'll get the Palo Cortado for 89, and the PX only a couple of thousand bottles, but it's still only 140 quid. I say still only, like that's something that everyone's up to about. But in the world of whiskey today, you know, this product is not a core range product. It's not going to be about for a long time.
Yeah.
To get a 7-year finish in really, really rare bodega PX casks, which that cannot be understated how rare those casks are. Can't be overstated, sorry. To be able to snap that up is pretty good. But yeah, I think that's what we try and do across our ranges. You know, we look at the whiskey, we look at the volume that we've got available, and we try and make it fair.
Yeah. He's got, so Peter Frank, he's just going to go, he's having to go. Thanks for organising this, Kev, and thanks for participating and sharing interesting information, Scott. It's been amazing, and to everyone, I'll see you next time. So Pete's had a good night as well, and a lot of the chat's been people chatting with each other, which always happens. It's a total thing talking about the whiskey, and there's a meetup coming up in September as well, and Glasgow, I think they're on Accord for Leg Fest. It's called. Jimmy Leg's coming over, and we make this big song and dance about it. Just Jimmy's coming over. Let's all go out. It's a great day. It was good last year, really good. So, Scott, this has been amazing, super informative. I think to bring out these three whiskies and showcase them at a good price point and everything as well, for the quality that we're getting, for the low yield of specifically the last one. It's great, and just the knowledge that you bring and what you're doing is a massive, I think, a massive thank you to the whiskey community for that, and just keep it going and keep bringing the same products that we love and kind of new kind of things as well. And maybe the next year or 2 years will be another series of some collection from a different country potentially. So I'm pretty sure if we use our minds, we'll be able to start whittling down what country they're going to be coming from next anyway.
There's not many left at this stage.
I was going to say, we're sitting in a kind of weird spot, but no, it's been amazing, and folks that have tuned in tonight as well. A lot of people have messaged me saying they'll catch it on the replay. They've got things on tonight, and obviously it'll be online for forever to catch up. If you really want to learn about your sherry finishes and sherry, how the casks are done, then make sure you give a wee tune in as well. And if you're going to the distillery, obviously Scott says he's a 9 to 5, so I'm pretty sure he'll be happy to come up and say hi to you if he's kicking about. A few festivals coming up. Are you going to any of the festivals? Will you be at the Glasgow Whisky Festival, or will you be gallivanting somewhere else?
I'm not entirely sure what the next couple of months hold. I've sent out the email over the last couple of days to the team. Where do you need me and when, sort of thing. I know I've got a week in Portugal in October, which dreadful, eh? You know,
that sounds terrible. Yeah. That's unfortunate.
But no, that'll be great, and I might try and get to the port houses that we work with on that trip as well. And then I'm going to be in Asia for 15, 16 days in November, which is right slap bang in the middle of the kind of European festival season. And because it's over 3 weekends, I'm going to miss out on quite a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm hopeful to get to a couple of shows this year. And as you know, Kev, we've got a great team of ambassadors now who can do those events for us as well. So if it's not myself there, you're going to meet some great representatives of the brand that have their own little stories and things, and that's fun to see as well. So yeah, there will be a Tomatin presence at all of these events, whether it's me or not. I'm not entirely sure.
No, well, Scott, thank you so much for taking your time to come on. I know we said we'd kind of look about an hour, but we're at 95 minutes, so I do apologise if you've had other things on, but it's been absolutely phenomenal to kind of learn more about this. Complete style. I don't think many people get that luxury of, they just get to know it's a Manzanilla cask and they don't know the story from where it's came from start to finish. So I really appreciate your time and the knowledge and the whiskey that you bring to us, you and Graham and the team as well. It's fantastic, and I'll give you a shout. As I say, we're heading up in the end of the month, or the first day in September, somewhere about then. So if I'm about, beers are on me anyway, and if I find some cool Manzanilla, I'll bring a bottle of Manzanilla for you. Hopefully one you've not tried, if I can find something.
Love that.
But no, thank you so much, guys. Thank you for tuning in. And again, thanks for Scott to take our time. But as always, you can join me next week and let's talk whiskey. Slainte, buddy. Thank you.
Pleasure. Cheers.